Foster's child never lacked ability. What he lacked was permission. Permission to cross lines that weren't necessarily written down. He learned early that some doors open with effort, and others only open when you are willing to become someone else entirely. Betsy was. Foster was not. And that difference is where this story ends. He never crossed the threshold, never stood before a judge, never spoke from the witness chair. But boxer and bellhop, Harry Kelley did. Harry Kelley made it inside. He married into the family just weeks after the vacuum left by suicide and shock. And then, by circumstance, he morphed into something more. Harry Kelley stood up when things started breaking down. He took responsibility for Betsy's child from her first marriage when her then spouse, Theodore Deutsch, committed suicide in a Chicago hotel room. And when Irene Moore Lyon's health began to fail. And when Dr. Lyon was growing older and dealing with her death. That was when Harry Kelley stepped in and took responsibility for the management of the 119-acre estate. According to court reports, more than 100 people worked under his supervision. Turns out, Harry Kelley was trusted and visible, if not powerful, in his own right. He was allowed to testify in support of his wife and his father-in-law once they began working together on the contested will. Meanwhile, Foster's child, the one with the closest bloodline, never even made it into the room where it happened. When the verdict came down in 1951 and Harry Kelley found out that the former will, the original will, had been reinstated, there were only two other people possibly as pleased, Dr. Lyon and Betsy to be sure. But Harry Kelley's life had changed forevermore as well. You see, the court decree had nuance in it. It wasn't replacing a will, it was reinstating the original. The decree did not represent cash, it represented a life where work became optional and time became elastic, where winters could be escaped instead of endured, where geography no longer imposed limits. This was the kind of wealth that turned distance into inconvenience. It made tropical vacations less of a luxury and more of a rhythm. Florida in winter, the Caribbean when the DC air turned heavy, hotels where staff remembered your name and asked how long you'd be staying this time. It meant travel without urgency. Suitcases unpacked slowly, letters forwarded instead of addresses changed, help that lived on the property, children raised by schedules that would bend around the comfort and conveniences of life. This was pre-jet age privilege, a world of verandas and ceiling fans. The decree wasn't about indulgence, it was about insulation from weather, from worry, from consequence. And once granted, that insulation was inexorably and seemingly permanently theirs. However, Kelley would never see it. On April 11th of 1953, the Evening Star from Washington, D.C. announced in a headline, Dr. Lyon's daughter is sued for divorce. They wrote about the divorce and the details of the court decree. The newspaper noted, Dr. Lyon and his daughter were once estranged. They were reconciled about a year ago during a court fight to break a will of the late Mrs. Lyon. There was this one decidedly devil of a detail, though. The reinstated will, created shortly after Betsy's birth, granted Dr. Lyon his proceeds of about $4.5 million in today's dollars in real time. For a man of 69, he would ostensibly be fine. Betsy would not inherit her majority share of what amounted to closer to $6 million in today's dollars until she turned 28. What's telling and damning, all at the same time, comes from the last sentence of the article, which indicated that she would turn 28 in the year of said article. Betsy's publicist, who was in all likelihood Betsy herself, was once again bending the facts to drive the outcomes she was seeking. Her May 1926 birth date cleanly and mathematically suggests that she would turn 28 in 1954. Not a few weeks later in 1953, when the article was published. Once again, storylines involving Betsy showed up with incredible accuracy, exceptional detail, and were printed to publication less than 24 hours after the event occurred. Might this accelerated timeline have been a little wishful thinking? But then again, who was Betsy to let truth get in the way of a good story? This headline told a story that would have evoked déjà vu had you not known better. Harry Kelley would leave love on the doorstep of hope, decidedly at Betsy's feet. The suit claimed that Betsy had left Harry and that her last known address was in Miami. The article also noted that Harry Kelley had become employed at the Woodner Apartments as a bellhop, a job built on proximity to power, but he was no longer going to be participating in it. Day after day, he watched and opened doors for people whose lives moved effortlessly forward, people who lived above consequence, above uncertainty, above need. He carried their bags, held their doors, learned their rhythms, and delivered against their expectations. A quiet apprenticeship in how privilege passes us by. So when Harry later found himself inside that world, married into it, entrusted with it, managing its moving parts, it must have felt like a rival. He expected he would benefit from it for the rest of his life. But history has a way of repeating itself. Once again, Betsy tapped out. Harry Kelley was left holding what he started with, only proximity to power. Not the dream, not the permanence, just the weight of a world passing him ever so closely by. But beneath the headline sat a deeper truth. Harry Kelley was allowed into the system. He was part of the marriage. He was in the courtroom. He is part of the record. And in most cases, to the victors go the spoils. But not here, not now. Approximately 8 weeks later, on June 12, 1953, the divorce to Harry Kelley becomes final. Interestingly, on the exact same day, the Fort Lauderdale News reported, "Newlyweds back from honeymoon." The city byline is Hollywood. How appropriate. Hollywood, not Hollywood, California, but Hollywood, Florida. Certainly, Hollywood, California would have rejected this script for being too implausible, too unbelievable. A small article in the June 4th, 1953, Hollywood Sun-Tatler on page 30 notes that Michael J. Colaboletta, 37, and our Betsy, 26, referred to as Elizabeth M. Kelley, both of Hollywood, were issued a marriage license at the Miami-Dade courthouse. Despite the mountains of potential money, and because of her age at the time, financial access to real monetary means was still a few years away. Newspaper articles notwithstanding, we will presume that Betsy would have correctly received her inheritance in May of 1954 at the age of 28. In 1955, death would come calling, not for her, but for those around her. Dr. Lyon, who had been selling off parcels of the Lyon Moore estate while he still could, passed on August 4th of 1955 at the age of 73. Then in September of 1956, just 3 years into the marriage and less than 2 years into Betsy's life-changing money, Michael Colaboletta dies. There are no headlines or storylines, no details leaked to the press that I could find. Just his passing at the young age of 40, quietly, for all the prior noise, for all the plethora of headlines, nothing. 8 years later, in August of 1964, her second husband and best supporting character, Harry Kelley, dies. He had moved on and remarried, but time waits for no person. Later that same year, on December 6th, Betsy dies at the age of 38. 38 is relatively young. While Betsy didn't live a long life, she lived a concentrated one. She lived fast, publicly, and with consequence. By 38, she had already experienced more than many do in twice the time. Her life wasn't measured in quiet decades, it was measured by events. Betsy didn't drift through life, she collided with it. She lived intensely. And intensity, not longevity, is what made Betsy unforgettable. She carried many names: Elizabeth, Moore, Betsy, Lyon, Deutsch, Kelley, Colaboletta. Our foster child carried many names as well: Foster, Wayne, James, Lyon, Stoughton, Flint, each one added deliberately. Names for lineage, names for legitimacy, names to mark them, names to be erased, and names created from beyond the grave. The names tell different stories, marriage by marriage by marriage, headline by headline by headline. People moved and changed, seemingly, in either instance, never fully anchored. They died close to 3 decades apart. Betsy, who lived life to its fullest extent and in her own agency. Foster, who spent his time proving, building, enduring. In the end, Betsy and Foster had more in common than anyone would guess. They were shaped by the same society, the same institutions, a world that rewarded perception, also treated belonging as something you could be granted or denied. Betsy lived in public, Foster lived privately, but both were carried forward by documents and decisions made on their behalf. And if you want to know who or what the beast was, it wasn't a person. It was permanent access to power. The access that made East Egg feel untouchable and West Egg feel forever temporary. The access that turns money into morality and inheritance into permission. Harry's access was only temporary. Betsy chased bold headlines only to secure fleeting fame. and Foster was denied, for he had a bloodline without standing. In The Great Gatsby, the green light flickers across the water, promising something just out of reach. In our story, that light flickered too, not just over a bay, but into courtrooms, across family names, and through the people of the time. In the end, the distance between East Egg and West Egg was never really water. It was access, permanent access to power. And so it is told, this has been Foster's Child. Thank you for listening.